not coming just because my father, just because my husband has called me. Hey, well, I've lost all this money because you didn't come. Well, more for you, says Bianca. So Bianca is the people pleaser turned rebel, I think. So Shakespeare, I didn't invent the idea of birth order. I mean, I'm sure. Always when I've talked about birth order before, I always get people coming up and saying, well, I was the eldest daughter, and I wasn't like that. It was my younger daughter, who's now a corporate lawyer and flies all over the world. She was the assertive one, you know. So it doesn't apply to everyone by any means. But I think it's quite an astute way of looking at Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia.
You've mentioned a few times now Shakespeare's source material, and in the book you're making productive use of Shakespeare's source material. And I wondered partly whether that's to do with your background in history, but whether sometimes as an actor the sources are unhelpful or even misleading, or whether what sort of way you find to use them as an actor, because clearly they're interesting to you.
Well, it may have to do with my sort of as a historian. I trained as a historian. I've always been very keen to put things into context. Unless they're in context, we can't understand them. You know, it's what I call the your most obedient servant syndrome. You know, if you just read a Samuel Johnson letter and he ends up your most obedient servant, you think, crikey, Johnson thinks he's a most obedient servant to this man. Well, of course he doesn't. It's the way everybody signed a letter. Okay? I should tell you a little story there. I was at Oxford. My special subject was Richard II, and a great medieval historian called K.B. Macfarlane, who was so great he never published anything much. Macfarlane gave a lecture on the Lollard Knights. Who were these Lollard Knights? And he gave 8 lectures on the Lollard Knights, and we all dutifully went there and writing away. And he ended up saying, we'll look at the wills of the Lollard Knights to see if we can detect Lollardy, which is, you know, John Wycliffe and all that, and the English translation of the Bible, etc., etc. Can we detect Lollardy? So it goes painstaking through the wills of all these knights, and we all think, yes, yes, you can see in the way this is phrased, it could be Lollard. And towards the end of the second lecture, he said, however, since the wills of Henry V and the Archbishop of Canterbury have identical phraseology, I don't think we can attach too much importance to this. And our pens stopped poised, and we looked up in amazement, I remember. And Macfarlane, who was not a humorous man, there was a very slight twinkle in his eye. It's a lesson I have never forgot. You must put things in context, which is why in the book I do have little chapters on fathers and daughters in contemporary society, fathers and daughters in contemporary playwrights, and what little we know of Shakespeare and his own daughters. These 3 chapters became a point of some contention with academics. Some said, oh, we know all this stuff, leave it out, we're not interested in this. And I was stubborn about this. Helped by Margaret, who was quite keen on them, fortunately, I moved them from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. Though I've still got academics saying, I think they should have been at the beginning of the book. I did say to Margaret, I could put them in appendices. And she said, no, nobody reads appendices. Don't put them in appendices. So I'm a great believer in putting things into context. But I think, just remind me of the question, I guess. So
it was about the source material, really,
and
source
whether
material. It can sometimes be helpful as an actor, but sometimes
I think it's more to do with the fact that all through my life, at odd times, I've written plays. I've tried to write plays. I'm a great believer in actors and directors having a go at writing plays, because you discover just how difficult it is. So I'm very interested in Shakespeare the dramatist. I'm very interested in the choices he makes, because he usually borrowed his stories. So he's got the story. Okay, how are you going to structure this story? What scenes are you going to include? What scenes are you going to leave out? What characters are you going to foreground? What characters are you going to background? A lot of choices went on in how he was going to structure this play. And I'm very interested in the choices he makes. And our prime guide to the choices are the sources, because we can at least look at the source material and say, well, how did you alter that, and what does it tell us? Just to give a couple of examples, in the sources, the two principal sources for Much Ado, the Don John character is a rejected suitor of Hero. And you can see Shakespeare thinking, oh, I'm so bored with the cliche of rejected suitors. I'm going to scrub that. You're not going finally to know why Don John is determined to destroy Claudio and his marriage. I'm going to leave it open. I think opacity is, I love that word, I think opacity is often a very good thing in Shakespeare. And of course, he went on to do it with Iago to an even greater degree. If you take Viola, now the two principal sources, about all the sources for Twelfth Night, Viola is already in love with Orsino. She is chasing him. That's why she's arrived in his dukedom. She's after him. And you can see Shakespeare thinking, no, that's a cliche. I think Viola would be much less interesting if you know, I went down that road. I'm going to make her just turn up in the dukedom and see where we go from there. And you think, how are you going to do that? Well, we'll have a shipwreck. I won't make it very authentic. We don't really feel there's been much of a shipwreck. I see. So why doesn't she catch the next boat on to where she was going? No. She's going to stay here. She's looking for her brother. Oh, I see. So she'll take lodgings in the town, and day after day after day will look for her brother. No, that's boring. That's boring. Well, there's this Countess, Olivia. Well, you could go and make she throw herself on the Countess Olivia. You'd love to have a young companion who's clearly a bit upper class. No, I don't think I'd do that. There's this Duke. I could dress up as a sort of young man and be a eunuch to him. And you think, that's incredibly improbable and ridiculous if you think about it. Like, what a choice to make. And Shakespeare's going to say, oh, don't worry, the play has got to start somehow, you know. John Barton was a great believer in this. Look, the play has just got to start. Don't worry too much about the first scene of King Lear, when all the threads that are left you. You know, the play's got to start. Just accept that it's got to start that way. Actually, John actually said to me, the point is halfway through the play, the audience have forgotten about the first scene. I thought, John, I don't think that's much help to an actor who's trying to work out what Lear is doing in the first scene. But you can see how much he looks at his source material and alters it. And of course, fortunately, we've got the old play of King Lear. So we know that Shakespeare followed the accepted story for the first two acts, and then he just went wild, you know, sent Lear out to the storm, made him go mad, made Cordelia run the King of France, bring an army, lose the battle, you know, and then get hanged. All mad adventures on, you know, on Shakespeare's part. I always think on the first night of King Lear, when Lear said, "This feather stirs," that the audience thought, well, of course it stirs, she's going to get up. You can't kill Cordelia, you can't kill Snow White. What are you doing? So he would sometimes, he got braver and braver with his source material. For example, in the main source for Winter's Tale, Pandosto is so overcome by fancying the Perdita character, Fornia, that he ends up committing suicide. And you can see Shakespeare think, no, I don't want to kill Leontes off. No, that's very melodramatic. I want to keep Leontes alive. So I find the source material incredibly helpful for trying to work out why Shakespeare has made the choices that he has and why he's structured the play the way that he has.
There are many more questions I could ask, but I'm aware that